This podcast is brought to you by RX Smart Gear. Whether you're just starting out in your fitness journey or an avid workout enthusiast, a jump rope is one of the most essential pieces of equipment you should have in your workout arsenal, and I cannot recommend RX Smart Gear jump ropes highly enough. I've been using the RX Smart Gear jump rope for close to 10 years now. The quality, variety, customization are beyond compare. I actually did a workout yesterday with my first RX Smart Gear rope that I got almost 10 years ago, and it's still an amazing addition, still worked out great for the workout that I did. I love these ropes. Not only are they dedicated to constantly improving and challenging the community with their variety of ropes, but they're also dedicated to the education when it comes to their ropes and promote proper movement and technique patterns, which we of course love at Power Monkey Fitness. They've recently launched their new Frevo rope, which is made of a high impact polymer that can withstand up to a 50-pound dumbbell impact. With grippy handles and smooth transitions between drills, you cannot lose with this rope. Take your freestyle game to another level and visit rxsmartgear.com and order your rope today. Welcome to the Power Monkey Podcast, where we chat with the best in the world of fitness about what they do. I'm your host, Dave Durante, and this week we have another movement breakdown for you. Today we are talking about Olympic weightlifting, specifically the foot position for your squat. So I take a back seat in this one, not talking so much. I leave it up to our resident weightlifting expert, Mike Cerbus, and Jordan Samuel to take the lead. And we hope you guys enjoy this little breakdown into some weightlifting technique.
Welcome, Power Monkey family, to another one of our movement podcasts. Dave has graciously given me the mic and the floor to talk about one of my passions, the squat. And this conversation is going to be slightly connected to a post that we made on our Instagram. Jordan can corroborate or confirm the date, but it was a few weeks ago before we had our camp.
March 11th.
And March 11th. So if you're scrolling and you want to see what we're talking about, get onto our Instagram. If you're not already following us, please hit the follow button. We greatly appreciate it and like the post. But on March 11th, we asked a question: what is the ideal squat stance? And it was a bit of a loaded question from my perspective, mainly because I go over this almost every weekend throughout the calendar year when Dave and I are doing our courses. And a huge component of how I teach is basically understanding why you have your body in the positions that you have your body in them per whatever you're trying to do. So for me, I come from Olympic weightlifting background. I have some very strong beliefs in how you should move to maximize your potential within that sport. But I would say, since being more immersed in the general population, specifically CrossFit, I have maybe softened on some stances and then gotten a little bit more strict on others. So I'm taking a very long way of walking into the question and the statement, which was, what is your most ideal squat stance? And I tend to lean in the direction of getting people to go a bit more narrow. So placing their feet around hip to shoulder width, which is oftentimes closer than what people are used to, and then trying to minimize how much angle they turn out their feet. So this will sound very familiar for all of our handstand enthusiast listeners that are familiar with Dave in terms of setting up positioning for handstands and where your hands are placed on the floor in terms of maybe not being so turned out, not being too wide. It's really, really similar in the squat. And my main reason for this is because I think the squat is best used when it's to maximize your range of motion, your mobility in lower body flexion. So when I think of that, I think of full flexion, hips, knees, ankles, and what position, what stance is going to allow me to get into full flexion there. So essentially, like butt to the floor, as deep squat as possible, using the range of motion that you have, and hopefully increasing some range of motion by steadily loading an exercise like the squat. Dave, Jordan, am I making sense? Because I know I'm talking a lot.
You are making so much sense, Mike. I love it. I do have a question though, and I'm
All
sure I
right.
know the answer to it, but I just want to give you an opportunity to respond. But you said your preference
Mm-hmm.
typically is to have a narrower squat stance to generally achieve greater flexion in all of the lower body joints. Why is that important to you to have greater flexion in all of the joints, the hip, the knee, and the ankle?
Oh, I think access to the greatest ranges of motion that we can have, let's say like without necessarily having to hyperextend or anything like that, but getting into full ranges of motion, max ranges of motion allows us, I think, to move more safely in everyday life. So I lean heavy on the fact that a lot of things are sport specific when they're taught, but then I would like that the sport specific areas that I teach also transfer into everyday life. So if I'm squatting down to pick something up off the ground, I would like to be able to do that in a multiple like variations. But at the same time, if I lose my balance and trip and fall, and maybe I fall into a kneeling position and then my heels hit my butt and my knees go fully flexed, like I don't want to tweak anything. So in my mind, if we use a back squat to embrace the full range of motion, but then in embracing that range of motion, strengthen it because we're doing eccentric loading and then potentially isometric pause in the squat, it's going to get your body much more durable, resilient, and able to withstand like day to day things. But then also for all of us that want to improve in sport, generate more power and force, I think going into those fuller ranges of motion is going to activate the most of your body, and you're going to get your most bang for your buck when you have hip to shoulder width stance and minimize turnout based off of what your body allows.
Can we just touch on that for a second?
I
The
love it.
minimized turnout, because I
Yep.
think this is
This
something
is
that
usually, yeah, this is usually a bigger like arguing point for people than even like going more narrow. A lot of people are willing to try like more narrow, but when you try to get somebody to square up, it can get a little bit argumentative, maybe.
I mean, I don't want to create an argument unless it's necessary, which I think is fine as well. But I'm thinking about it again as it applies to a lot of the comments and the questions and the pushback that I get with handstands, with people turning their hands forward and understanding fingertips playing a role in terms of stabilizing in the same way that maybe toes play a role in stabilizing. But I think people are on their feet so much throughout their lives that they start to forget, or it becomes so natural for them to not realize that the foot and toe play a role in stabilizing yourself as much as it does in your ankle,
Hmm.
that you start to lose some of that stability when you turn further and further out. And I'm curious from your perspective if that's a concern for you in terms of the stability aspect of being able to fully engage through the foot as
Hmm.
that foot slowly starts to turn out.
Yeah, absolutely. And even more so the longer I've been teaching and coaching and the further removed I've been from being just an athlete. So it wasn't necessarily something that I was too thoughtful of in my own training. I tell everybody when I start teaching them, I started squatting with a barbell when I was like 9 years old. And thankfully, I was in a decent position at that point, and it just stayed throughout my career. But as I've learned a little bit more, especially with working with a lot of our physios about how the body functions, realizing that putting my feet closer to straight forward allows me to dig in a little bit. If somebody's able to see, like if my pointer finger is my big toe, the moment that I push down with that big toe, I'm usually able to activate and feel like a grip from the floor all the way up through my legs, into my hips, into my glutes, through my core. And this is something that, yeah, I think is so necessary, especially for, let's say, adult learners of the squat. Like you almost have to rewire what's happening because the common complaints you get from people that are squatting are it hurts my knees, it hurts my back, it's not comfortable, and a lot of that comes from having no connection to their foot. So like you said, Dave, with the handstand, the further you rotate your hands out, sometimes you lose some control, and it's maybe more of a passive position, and I feel the same way with feet. There's a within reason you can turn out a little bit for comfort, but most people are able to squat with their feet like 10 to 15 degrees turned out, if not forward, and go into a relatively deep position. And then from there, you're strengthening your foot, you're building your arch, you're not having to do like crazy things like over torque your knees out or anything like that. You can kind of feel from foot all the way up through your body. And that's something that if you come to a weekend course, or you have, like we'll go over this for 2 hours. But what's been cool is over the years, the more that I've been strict on this, or wanting to over explain it, the easier it's been for me to teach people to snatch and clean and jerk. But then also, the more it makes sense when we go into other movements. So Jordan and I were talking about this earlier. I would never have had a rationale like this before working with CrossFitters. But if you think of all the movements you have to do in CrossFit, and then some of the apparatus that you have to use, think of an air bike, think of a rower, think of a ski erg, think of doing double unders. Like, how are your feet positioned in those movements? The more they're under your hips to shoulders and the more straightforward, the more congruent they are with like getting into those machines that force you to move through pretty big ranges of motion. And then thinking of something like box jumps and rebounding and jumping up and down. Like, if you start turning your feet out, you're exposing your inner knee to some pretty dicey, let's say, repercussions. So I just think that the more we can experiment and explore with getting a squat stance that activates the most of your body to keep you safe, and then Jordan, the going into that full flexion, I think it's going to make you resilient. And then again, the strongest, like most impressive squatters in Olympic weightlifting, they generally don't have too crazy of stances. Like, they're usually within reason, like hip to shoulder, minimal turnout, go down low, and then they have long careers too.
So one of the more common cues that you hear in the CrossFit space is, drive your knees out when you're squatting. And so my
Yeah.
question to you is, where does that play a role when you're talking about foot position? Because a lot of times if somebody tries to line their feet up relatively square and they don't have good hip mobility or
Mhm.
tibial rotation, they try to drive their knees out and their feet slide out, or not
Yeah.
slide
Yeah.
out, their feet turn out.
Mhm.
So where in the hierarchy of things do you put the knee turnout, if at all, into your little basket of tricks?
My hierarchy of squat needs.
Yeah.
It's always hard to generalize, and I try not to be one of the people that overgeneralizes, because I think that's very unfair, and then somebody can take the cue in the wrong way. So I usually tell everybody when I'm teaching and working with them, a cue is a good cue to the right person at the right time. So, like, driving your knees out for somebody that's knees like cave in really, really bad, generally on the way down of a squat, that's where you're trying to correct that. On the way up, like putting some pressure from big toe to like raise your arch, and then by default keep your knees tracking like over your toes to slightly out. I think it's a benefit, but at the same time, it's something that I don't over coach or over cue, because on the way up from a squat, there's not much negative to the knees coming in a little bit. Like, on the way up, that can be just a mechanical advantage that the body's trying to work with.
Hmm.
And there's generally nothing that shows like damage to knees if the knees go in slightly when you're coming up. It's on the way down where you can have knee damage.
Hmm.
So I
That's
think that's
interesting. I've
always.
heard.
That is interesting.
Oh, I was just gonna say that's been a misconception a little bit, and I'm thankful to have some people that are much smarter than me confirm that. But if you watch most maximum attempts of a back squat, front squat, or clean at a high level weightlifting, on the way up, you'll probably see 50-60% of weightlifters have a decent knee cave in, if not like an excessive knee cave in. As long as their knees aren't caving in on the way back down, there's generally no negative to that. It's always on the way down where you have to be more conscious. And that's another reason why, like, maybe another topic, but why I love eccentric, like slow eccentrics on squats, so you can feel and learn the like best movement pattern for you.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jordan. You want to follow up there?
I was going to actually ask a slightly different question. So if you have something in line with what he was just talking about, go for it.
No, I mean, I've seen you demo this at courses all the
Mhm.
time where you show, and when I watch you squat heavy, what happens is exactly what you talked about. You're very precise on the descent, and on the ascent, depending on the how maximal the load is, there is a slight internal rotation that maybe happens caving into the knee. And I think people will watch and be like, oh, his squat stance needs help, or, maybe
Mhm.
that weight was a little too much for him. So I think the big takeaway here is, one, that's an important note, and I think it would be great for us to be able to, cite some cases or make some references to help people understand this. But then also, w- back to Jordan's first question, is your response is the response that I think we give so often, that I think is the proper response when it comes to the intricacies of these questions, is it depends.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It depends is there's no universal black and white answer to a lot of these things with regards to, should the knees constantly be pushing out? Well, it depends on the person that you're working with. Is that going to be optimal for what their issue particularly is? And I think that's something that, people get frustrated with, but a good coach, a good instructor, a good educator sees the value in being able to look at a person as an individual, and not just as, everyone being the exact same thing in terms of what their needs are.
Yeah, definitely. And Jordan, before to hold on to your question, just kind of to
Mhm.
continue on that, I always want everybody, hopefully if you're listening to us, it's because you enjoy learning. We like teaching. And if you're squatting, there should be a reason, like, why are you squatting? So if your goal is just to move as much weight as possible, then you're probably better off taking more of a powerlifting approach and going with a wider stance and a lower bar, and then deciding how much depth you want to hit to count it or not. Like, that's going to give you probably the strongest squat. But if you want the most transferable squat that's going to allow you to adapt and have a really, really significant level of mobility, and I think the ability to generate, let's say, usable force and power, then I think whatever stance allows you to squat as deep as you can with an upright posture. I think this is going to transfer into the most movements across sport domains, everything like that. If you just want to have, a big thick booty and have big glutes, then do more good mornings, do more box squats, like do things like that. There's always a why to it. And if somebody is maybe arguing with me, I think I had one time in the last 15 years where somebody argued with me at a course about why we were squatting the way we were. And I said, yeah, but you came to an Olympic weightlifting course. So of course we're going to go over the squat stance that I think makes you, the best in this sport. And then with an emphasis on, longevity and health and all of these things. And then they were like, oh, well, I'm more into powerlifting. And I said, yeah, that's fine. Like, that's like, you're going to find the stance that allows you to perform best in that sport or discipline. But the why behind this one is because we're focused on high bar, full depth. I think pound for pound, the best way to back squat in the world.
So you actually stole my question. That was exactly what I was going to ask was, Dave
Yes.
had a perfect lead in, it depends. And I was going to ask if there, what are the other reasons why you might squat with different squat width stance? So, you covered more of a powerlifter stance, which tends to be more of like a sumo squatting stance oftentimes. Is there ever any reason to go even narrower than
Yeah,
what you personally
possibly.
consider to be an ideal squat stance for transferability?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And things always come down to body types too. So there are world record power lifters that squat relatively high bar, full depth with like closer stance. I mean, the one that or I guess two that I'm biased towards are Mark Henry and Shane Hammond, because they were also world competitive Olympic weightlifters, but they squatted with like almost a traditional Olympic style back squat and were world champion powerlifters as well as competitive on the world stage Olympic lifters. But they were short, they had small little femurs, like they were built to squat in that stance and move a ton of weight. If you get a power lifter or a strongman competitor that has longer femurs and a shorter torso and a different body type, if they're not incredibly mobile, then they're probably not going to move a lot of weight with a high bar trying to have a close stance. So they'll open up and do more of a, low bar, hinge dominant squat, which is fine. And then to go closer, I usually do this in some of the demos. I'll show like a foot together, like your feet touching squat. It's a lot of pressure on your low back. So I don't like encourage people to do that for heavy weights or testing. But one of the US weightlifters that was, I would say, pretty well known and I would say popular for squatting with a very narrow stance was John North. So
Mm.
he would do his back squats with Like I would almost call it, looked like a cyclist stance. I mean, they were super close, but he was able to squat a lot of weight and he was an incredibly mobile lifter. So it just worked for him. Like I would never teach anybody to squat like that. But if they start to feel strong and powerful, and that's like an individual adaptation, I would rather see that than an excessively wide stance that puts pressure like on your labrum in your hips.
For those listeners that want to try to not narrow their squat, but more square up their feet a little bit more, but they're
Mhm.
having a hard time keeping them there because their feet keep wanting to shift out and these sorts of things. Is there a drill that you like to just
Mhm.
generally give people that helps to get that that stability and that rotational component?
Yeah, I think a lot of people get very stubborn and feel like they're cheating if they elevate their heels. But a lot of times adding some heel elevation allows for more comfort in a slightly narrow and slightly more turned in stance. So if your goal is to maximize flexion, I would say first on your hips and your knees and not worry so much about your ankle mobility. And you want to get a little bit more comfortable and strong in those positions. If you're squatting in flat shoes, unless you're really, really mobile, I think that's not the greatest strategy to squatting in general. I think the slight heel elevation allows people to get a better depth with an upright torso. So it's a more comfortable position. It loads the quads a little bit more. It allows you to move with better integrity at heavier weights, and then you can kind of play from there and go into flat shoes. If somebody's really really mobile, flat shoes are fine. But in general, I've noticed that most people's squats improve at least by putting weightlifting shoes on, and then if not, like having a little slant board or using plates under their heels just to hit a better position. Which also the other thing that I like about that, and I think a lot of people don't talk about with weightlifting shoes, is sometimes the little heel height is not so much about um, allowing you to squat deeper, but it actually pushes some weight into your toes. And then by default, your toes grip in your shoe.
Mm.
And I'm like, yeah, I've been on like a 3-year mission now of trying to get people to stop putting all their weight on their heels when they lift.
Weight in the
Like,
heels, weight in the heels, weight in the
yeah,
heels,
weight in the
weight in the
heel.
heels.
Like that again, that'd be like if Dave's Q was telling everybody to put their weight in the back of their palm when they're doing a handstand. Like
Okay, so you're
you
saying
can't.
get on your tiptoes and
Yeah, yeah,
squat.
and that's always the argument is then people take it too far the other direction. Well, he's saying to put all his weight on his toes. I'm like, no, but to me, my toes they have a brain and like they're in charge. So I want them to be fully active on the foot, and then the heel just has to kind of go along for the ride and be there. So I also like if somebody's kind of struggling with comfort, don't be stubborn and continue to try to squat barefoot or in flat shoes. You might surprise yourself if you do, 2, 3, 4 months of squatting with your heels slightly elevated, and you can actively feel your toes when you're squatting.
To me, it's a positional component, right? Similarly to getting hands in the right spot, elevating the palms of the hands, which we talked about when we talk about this in terms of positioning for handstand, taking the stress off the wrist, taking the stress off of the ankle so that you can work on the positioning of the foot properly, right?
Mhm.
So it's less about the actual weight of the squat that you're doing, and it's putting more emphasis on position. So you can make sure that you're mechanically moving correctly, and then you load on top of that. So I think for someone like you're saying, Mike, that if you need a drill or you're having trouble, yeah, maybe put a lifter on, elevate the heel, work on the positioning of the toe, get more weight into the front of the foot. But don't just heavy load that right away.
Yeah.
Understand the value that comes along with the mechanics and what the toe is doing before you start saying, okay, let me see if I can get up to 90% with my heels elevated if I've never done that
Mhm.
before. Just feel the difference that comes along with the positional change and then kind of go from there. Is that correct? Use it as a
Yeah,
positional tool is what I'm trying to get across.
definitely. And I mean, the nice thing with, especially with squatting, is usually when you put people in these positions, they can't do the same weight because they're now loading muscles that they're not used to loading, and they feel weaker and a little bit more vulnerable, which is then sort of easy for me to convince them to take their time with it. And
That can also
again,
be super frustrating though, right? Like,
oh,
shit, like
totally. It takes
I'm
some
so much
trust.
stronger here. Like, why am I taking this, taking a step
Yeah.
back if I
That
can
was my
already
whole
lift this
journey
amount of?
when I got into CrossFit because I would exclusively low bar back squat prior to CrossFit. I was, doing the bodybuilding thing. And then when I got into CrossFit, it was like, no, 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 you got a high bar. And I'm like, this is stupid. Like I'm lifting way less weight. But then I
Yeah.
eventually got to the point where I was able to lift the same weight on a high bar that I used to lift on a low bar. And so, but yeah,
Mhm.
it took some time, and it was,
Uh,
I think, valuable because it helped me translate to other things that I was doing in CrossFit, like cleaning and front squatting and these other sorts of
mhm.
things.
And everything takes a layer of trust when you're receiving new information from somebody that's asking you to make a change. You have to trust that they are offering you good advice and good guidance. And even if the initial result to you seems like a step backwards, I mean, there's reasons why we have sayings like that, like, take one step backward to take two steps forward, like stuff like that. Sometimes you have to be willing to do that. Like a personal example that I'll give for people is my entire weightlifting career, my coach always made fun of me for front squatting and cleaning on my fingertips. And he always told me that I was being lazy, that I was not lifting as much as I could because I was doing that. And I thought, you're so dumb. Like, this is comfortable for me. And if I try to grip it with my full grip, it doesn't feel good. And then I hit a point in my career where I was completely stagnant for like 3 or 4 years with cleans. And like two more coaches made the suggestion, maybe when you're front squatting, you should be using your full grip so you can actually activate more muscles. Well, unfortunately, the muscles I was trying to activate were weak, so they didn't like it. And it took me a lot of trust to play with that and see like a small amount of improvement, which could have been much more had I have just trusted the coach that I trusted with almost everything. For some reason, I didn't trust him on this piece. So it's another layer of like, if you're listening and you're learning and you're going to courses and workshops and working with different coaches, ask why all the time. Um, Try something, but also, you have to trust that the person you're asking is going to take you in the right direction. If you don't trust them, then like work with somebody else.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think that asking why is one of the best things you can do as an athlete. And if you ever come across a coach that gets frustrated or upset when you ask why, that's kind of a telling sign as well, because as a coach, you should want your athlete to take some ownership and understand why they're doing what they're doing, because you're not always going to be there with them. So ask why, and if you get any pushback on that, that's kind of a tell in my mind too.
Yeah, and I think as coaches, it's better if we think of ourselves as teachers versus lecturers.
Mm,
So a lot of coaches, I think, enter coaching as I'm a lecturer and I'm telling everybody what to do and they will do it. And then when they get asked why, they feel like it's disrespectful.
right.
Versus if you're a teacher, you're so excited when kids ask why, because then you're like, oh my gosh, they're interested. Now we can go deeper. Now they can learn. Now maybe they'll be a teacher. Like all these are exciting things. So some of that too is probably we need Dawn in here for like mindset of coaches. Like, are you teaching or are you lecturing? And there's always a time for both. But I think in general, like somebody asked that at I think maybe the last camp, I said something about, I feel much more like a teacher than a coach. And they're like, well, what's the difference? And I said, I don't know. I guess it's just how you grow up and what words you use for it. But I like teacher. Like, I feel like we're
I think
teaching.
the distinction between teacher and lecturer is important, and it's one of
And
the
that's,
uh, I bring it up to every single course group that I teach at camp. The first thing I mention is that session is not a lecture; it's a discussion.
mhm.
And I want people. I think it also automatically it gets people more engaged because they know that they can participate verbally, not just by me telling them do something and they do it. They can engage mentally too and say, okay, if there's something that doesn't make sense or needs elaboration, I know that it's welcomed here.
Mhm.
Yep.
So like discussion is such a big part of being able to, and the thing that I think is sometimes hard for a coach or a teacher or a lecturer is to say, I don't know,
Mhm.
because we're supposed to know everything with regards to our expertise. And so, you end up showing a little vulnerability yourself if you say, I don't know the answer to that. But I think that's the appropriate answer in the cases where you actually don't know, as opposed to just making shit up. So you have to be able and confident enough in what you do know to be able to say, maybe I don't know this, and I'll look it into for you. And I've had to do that plenty of times. It's just part of the nature of you being an educator that is also learning yourself.
I say that on a daily
One,
basis. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I think that's a very true statement. But no, I think to everybody listening, we have wound down. We could just continue to go down our
Well,
rabbit
I have
holes
one
of,
more question though.
oh, well,
It's
let
for
me finish.
Dave.
Let me finish my train of thought,
Oh,
Jordan.
all right,
My
fine. I thought you were
goodness.
going to wrap us up here. My
Um,
bad. I
no,
don't
no, no,
know.
no. No, hold on to your question. I just wanted to say that more what Dave was saying. It's a reminder to me, like, um, I think always working on your craft. So wanting to be the best coach or teacher also requires a level of learning. And then sometimes the best way to learn is to try to teach. So
Mm.
like this is also what's really fun. I think we're still all on our Power Monkey Camp high. Like it's such a cool environment of collaborative learning. And it's not like we have the best coaches in the world there, but all of us end up learning a lot, sometimes even with movement from campers that come and offer a new perspective or new experiences. And this is just something that I'm continuously intrigued by, and it's why I'm always excited to get back in the lab and keep working with people.
We can get you a lab coat or something to wear at your next snatch
Yeah.
session.
All right, I'm ready.
Dave, you've been squatting a lot more, right? You've been following Mike's squatting program. What are you squatting these days? 405,
No,
420?
this is a while ago. I haven't squatted in a little bit. I go through periods. I mean, I squat regularly, not always with weight, lunging and
Sometimes I
air
squat down
squats,
to
and
pick things up.
preparing for Murph in a couple of weeks. So a lot more air squats lately. Um, for me, keeping full range is really critical. So I don't wear shoes very often. So like Mike's point about elevating heels, I actually do a lot of my squat work barefooted because I enjoy being able to get as low into positions as possible. So like, I mean, I'm not as mobile as a lot of other people, but I am mobile enough to be able to get to that position comfortably. So am I squatting towards maximum lift range? No. Am I squatting to make sure that I still have my daily functionality accessible to me? Yes. But I will say that I probably could add a little bit more load to my daily squatting regimen. But right now, it's basically a pretty stagnant number.
I don't know. Your air squats are pretty fast. I will say that. All
Dave
the
does probably have the best air squats out of the three of
yeah,
us, so I'll give
like
him
I
that.
can't keep up with them anymore. I used to be able
Thank you guys. I appreciate the squat love. I don't know if there's anything else that I'm good at with squats, but I have a good depth to my air squat. Yes, I'll take it.
Jordan, was that your final question?
That was it for me. Yeah, I'm wrapped up
All right.
here.
Well, no, I love it. I'll let Dave, give our closing remarks, but as we often ask everybody, whether we're in person or, in this format, like if you have questions, reach out to us on socials. If you're listening to this, I'm quite certain you're following us on Instagram. But if you're not, at Power Monkey Fitness is a great way to reach out and ask questions, and we're always happy to talk about more things. And then, of course, like come see us in person. Where this will definitely be released well before our fall camp 22. So we've got some spots left, which I'm thinking might disappear pretty soon because we're over half full now and ahead of schedule on that. So if you want to come join us, I would recommend going to powermonkeycamp.com, signing up for that. If you are really inspired to squat after listening to us have this conversation and you do not already have our app downloaded, download the Power Monkey Training app. We have a lovely squat plan on there that I wrote. I'm a little bit biased because I know it works. So if you want a nice 2 day a week squat plan to start to explore some of these methods, download it, give it a try. We've got some free trials in there. And then, of course, let us know how you're doing with it. So
Now, is that a squat plan that's going to cause is it a booty focused squat plan? Is it a
it's not
transferability focused
so.
squat plan? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, all squats are going to help build the booty. But if you guys want a specific booty building plan, then we're gonna have to put that together for you in the future. And we're always taking requests for desired plans out there. So once you get in our app and start using things, the nice thing is we have some direct communication with the coaches, so you can send a little message to us. We're right there on the other end to help out all the time. Very happy and willing. And if it's squat related, you'll definitely hear from me. Anything handstands or pulling upper body movements, you're going to hear from Dave.
Mike, I think that was excellent. Hit all the points. Thanks so much. Educating as usual. I have to go squat, so I'll see you guys later.